All right, Charlie, you are up.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. John asked me to take a swipe, and I finally got the courage up to do this. So we're going to go a little off track, I guess, but we're going to read Deuteronomy chapter 6. And it's kind of one of my, I'll say, my lifetime verses, my favorite section of the word. And just thought I'd share some of my feelings and musings on what I've learned here. So Deuteronomy 6:4 through 6:6. I'll pick on some. Hey, Dan, do you want to read that, please?
Sure. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart.
You kind of read that, and that's like, everybody hears that. It's a very highly quoted scripture, but my question, obviously, through the first part of that is, it's got our highest priority. And according to this, it says the Lord our God is one, and we shall love him with all our heart and soul. And, the book of Deuteronomy is kind of based around the fact that it teaches man to love and obey God. I mean, there's many facets to it, but that's a big chunk of it. And verse 4 here, chapter 6, hones in on our love for God and why we should. And I just have musing and notes in it, but I guess 6:4 is one of the greatest doctrinal statements in the Old Testament. I didn't know that. And like the Jewish people refer to it as the Shema, which means to hear. Jesus quoted Deuteronomy 6:4 and 5 to the lawyer who asked him, what is the greatest commandment? I have that right here. Matthew 22, 35 through 38. It said, then one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him and saying, teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And it's so important to us in our lives. 1 John 4:7 and 8. See, how about, hey, Mark, can you read that? There, I think he's it. Oh, you're muted, Mark. 1 John 4:7 and 8. Are you available to? If not, I can get.
Yeah. 1 John
4:7 through 8.
All right. 1 John 4:7 through 8. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and he who loves is begotten of God and is coming to know and understand God and get a better and clearer knowledge of him. Verse 8, he who does not love has not become acquainted with God, for God is love.
A lot of people, and I've heard it referred to this way, that as a Christian, everybody has a badge somewhere, and our badge is love. And the 1 John 4:7 and 8 reinstates that fact. But it's how do we keep that love for God vibrant? And like he shared in verse 5, love him with all our heart, soul, and all our strength. That's hard to do. I think it's really hard to do. The other interesting thing is that in the Old Testament, the Jews believe that this is one of the verses that kind of rules out the Old Testament, so to say, because they say it talks about one God, and yet it really means it's a plural word for one. And was it 1 Corinthians 8:6? Says yet for us there's one God, we worship one God existing in three persons. Actually, I should read the whole thing. Sorry about that. I kind of ramble sometimes. It says, yet for us there is one God, the Father of whom are all things, and we are for him one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom are all things, and through him we live. And, it's just so important to know that we don't serve multiple gods, like the Jews wanted to try to push out, that we serve the same God. It's one God. So kind of along with that, we have so many distractions and so many things pulling us away from each other, from, what our central themes are. How can we tune the worldly distractions out to keep the Lord as our first priority? As I kind of was looking and reading and digging deeper and deeper, one of the things that came up was Malachi 3:16, and it says, then those who feared the Lord spoke to one another, and the Lord listened and heard them. So a book of remembrance was written before him for those who fear the Lord and meditate on his name. So obviously writing it down and, getting the word of God written down was the, as it's described here, to help keep them in our heart, so to say. Any questions, comments? No, we can move.
I think it will also help us to put God first when we remember, excuse me, that we're all God's children. I think sometimes we want to put our family's priority first, our own priority first, or we see other people and we might not necessarily look down on them, but not put them with their needs as important as ours. And I think, I know for myself, when I remember even the students that I can't stand, that they're God's children too, it motivates me to kind of do more for them than I normally would. And I think that kind of will help us with our day-to-day life when we start putting ourselves first, that we remember that we're all one. It'll kind of help us with our focus, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. 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 How about Ruth? Hey, March, do you want to read Deuteronomy 6:7 through 6:9?
Sure. Deuteronomy chapter 7.
No, 6.
Chapter 6, verse
7 through 9.
Verse 7 to 9. Yes, sir. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit on your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
And part of, the charge here is, we're to love the Lord our God with all our heart and soul, but we're also to pass it on. And to me, that is probably the highest priority in our lives, is we need to pass on this great treasure, present, gift, and love, encouragement to others. And obviously the idea is that we would pass it on to our children, and like it says, and in everything and anything we do, it says, pass diligently. It says, you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. He doesn't give you, this is how you do it. He just gives you broad examples of how to do it. You talk of them, when you walk, okay, you walk, sure. We also drive cars and, go on airplanes and everything else. And just taking all those moments in time to pass on everything that we know and what we've learned, our experience. And it's so important to always, and I don't look at it as forcing it down the throats, like you need to learn this. It's not that. It's how we do it. And it's, like you said, when you walk, we all do that. When you lie down, we all got to go to bed at night. We all wake up in the morning. And it's our responses, our actions, and all the way, and all of our life, all the way through. And, the Lord brings people into your life, whether it's your children or other friends, family, whatever else. You need to work on, how can I pass these traditions on, what I've learned, and to others around me and underneath me. Um, you know, one of the reasons, the other reasons you want to keep passing this on is that that's how armies are built. Is they have a captain, the whole rank system, and they put many people under other people, and the pyramid kind of grows out from there. But everybody's responsible to everybody else, and one of the reasons why is in that way you have backup for when you need to have a situation, and the more you grow the community, the stronger the stronger you become, and in the case of the Lord's word here, we have so many things fighting against us, and distractions to push it away. It's hard. It's a challenge to do it. Even in Moses' time, when Jethro, his father, came to him and said, was talking to him in Exodus 18:20. Let's see, who can I get to read that? Let's see. John Simpson, can you read Exodus 18:20?
Sure.
Yeah, 18:20, actually 20 through 24. I'm sorry, 18:20 through 24.
Okay. Exodus 18:20 through 24. It says, "And you shall teach them the statutes and the laws, and show them the way in which you must walk, and the work they must do. Moreover, you shall select from all the people able men such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. And let them judge the people at all times. Then it will be that every great matter they shall bring to you, but every small matter they themselves shall judge. So it will be easier for you. They will bear the burden with you. If you do this thing, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all this people will also go to the place in peace. Go to their place in peace."
And 24 was verse 24. So Moses heeded
Did I
the
miss
voices.
it? Sorry.
Oh, no
I'm
problem.
sorry, I missed it.
Uh,
So Moses heeded the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said.
So there's a basic structure. If you look at it, it talks about 10,000s and thousands, and that's so important, that because one person, in the case of Moses, I mean, he was overloaded. I mean, his father came in, and he had all these people. Imagine a tent with Moses in it. There's a line of people down the hall, all have their little problems and complaints and illnesses and everything else. And Jethro's looking at this, going, "This ain't right. This needs to be fixed." And obviously, the Lord spoke through him, and I think it's so true for us today that we as one person cannot tackle the world, but as we pass these traditions on and down and out, we create other Christians, and and people learn, and it's so important to us to continue that growth, so that our burden gets a little lighter as we go along here, because we have other people that can help out. Any questions, comments? Sorry, I've been talking a lot.
I like what you said, Charlie, about the cars. The text says while you're walking, while you're lying down, and then you said cars, and I like that. I think what we want to be able to do is to kind of weave it into the context of our lives, right? Because we want it to be in the rhythm of our lives, and not necessarily a prescribed step-by-step thing. God gives us the wisdom, the Holy Spirit directs us in how to do that, and the intent of it is to be able to pass to our children, but to do it in the context as it weaves through our the rhythms of our life. And I think that's wisdom. I like that. So I took that down. I appreciate that.
Sure.
I also like that when you were talking about, he doesn't give us specific steps on how to do this. And I think that's kind of great, because, right, if he did, we would find exceptions to all these rules, right? It'd be like, oh, he said we should do it on this particular time, but we're not in that time. So I don't need to worry about it right now. But I think that's the whole point is no, there's not a particular time that you're supposed to be doing this. You're supposed to be doing it when you're up, when you're awake.
Yeah, and that's true. That's what I like. Like it's kind of just a little mini framework of what you're supposed to do. And so people talk about the Bible not being relevant, John, but wait a minute, look at this. There's no, like you said, no set steps. It's just like, okay, you should be doing this. Is how you do it is your baby. And that's what I think is interesting. Jason, do you want to read Deuteronomy 6:10 through 6:12, please?
10, 11, and 12.
10, 11, and 12, yes.
All right. When the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that he would give you, a land with large and beautiful cities that you did not build, houses full of every good thing that you did not fill them with, cisterns that you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant. And when you eat and are satisfied, be careful not to forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery.
Oops. Did you read? Which ones did you read, Jason? I think you read ahead of me.
10, 11, and 12, Deuteronomy 6.
Deuteronomy 6, 10, 11, and 12.
Yeah.
So it shall be written to the Lord God, the land of which. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was off. My bad. I've too many screens going on here. Sorry. Interesting that Deuteronomy is one of the most quoted Old Testament books. I didn't know that. So, and what I kind of gleaned out of this was, there's a danger, a real strong danger. It is a huge danger of leaving God in times of prosperity. And that's, what we're talking about here is here's a time of prosperity. And so easy to forget who God is when we get it, when we're doing, everything's going great, all, land of plenty and lots of income and everything's going great. And we kind of push God off on the side. And, that's a strong warning through here is that, it says that when he brings you into the land that was promised to you, that, beware, forget who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, so easy to forget all that. And that's, once again, it goes back to those traditions and passing those traditions down. The Israelites are guilty of this all the time. And, even Moses, and I wrote down Numbers 20, chapter 3 to 12, where, there was no water, so they were complaining. I'll read it here. It says, now there was no water for the congregation. So they gathered together against Moses and Aaron. And the people contended with Moses and spoke, saying, if we only had died when our brethren died before the Lord, why have you brought up the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness, that we and our animals should die here? And why have you made us come up out of Egypt and bring us to this evil place? It is not a place of grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, nor is there any water to drink. So Moses and Aaron went to the presence of the assembly, from the presence of the assembly to the door of the tabernacle meeting, and they fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take the rod, your brother and your brother Aaron, and gather the congregation together. Speak to the rock and their eyes, before their eyes, and it will yield its water. Thus you shall bring water out for them of the rock, and give drink to the congregation and their animals. So Moses took the rod before him and commanded him and them. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly before the rock, and he said to them, hear now, you rebels, must we bring water out for you of this rock? Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their animals drank. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe me to open the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I had given them. So it's been another 40 years in the desert. And it's so easy to me to get the focus off God. And in this case, people were grumbling, and God said, speak to the rock. And what does Moses do? He says, Is it up to us to give you guys water? Whack, whack, hit the rock. It completely not, disobeying what God had told him. And, it's so easy for us to do that in our present day. We go, okay, I've got to get this done because this needs to be done for the Lord or whatever. And yet that's not what he's instructed us. He's instructed us that we're supposed to be encouraged and eager and love what we do. And so any comments or questions or?
Well, this is exactly where he did the opposite of what Jethro told him.
Mm-hmm.
This caused him his 40 years in the desert and everybody else, and only 2 people made it out of there alive because of the frustration he had dealing with the people. Instead of he took it personal that they were complaining, I guess. There was a real issue here with delegation. I guess the people took it straight to him and Aaron. And then Moses had enough. He just had enough. And the Lord, that striking that stone was, man, that was a big eye opener for me when I first learned that years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You got to do what you're told to do, the exact same way, the way you were told to do it.
Right. Well, and we know from earlier in Moses' travels that the first time God told him to strike the rock, so he knew that. So so when we just if you do reading the Bible in 1 year, we just read about Balaam and Balak, and how Balaam was told the first time by God, don't go. Second time, go, you can go. But the idea was that Balaam was thinking that he might have an opportunity to earn some riches from Balak and actually curse the nation of Israel. And that's when the whole story about the donkey came into play, and talking to him and God saying, you're going to listen to me and everything you do and say, everything. And so, it's so important that if we keep, and like you said, Jody, it's so true, it's so easy for us to get frustrated because we just get overwhelmed, and we just need to say, okay, Lord, what were those instructions again? I think it's okay to go back and ask God, like, what did you say before you do it? But a lot of times we go, I gotta take care of this, and that's what we do, and then off we go on the wrong tangent. So true.
What Jody said, I call it improved obedience. You have disobedience like Jonah, you have complete obedience, and then you have, sometimes we fall in the trap of, I can improve upon what God told me, right? And I see that with the striking. Something he did before, he was given different instructions. He kind of went, well, if I do this again this way, Uzzah is another good example, right? They thought they can improve upon the instructions on how to carry the ark. They put it on a cart, it begins to fall, someone touches it, instantly killed, because they thought they could improve upon the instructions of the Lord by putting it on a nice new cart instead of carrying it. So I know that I can fall into this trap. I'll do one thing one way, God gives me something else to do, and I want to try and find a way to combine the two. Or, well, if we just do it this way, I'm still doing what he asked, but I'm going to improve upon what he asked me to do. It's, like Jody said, we need to follow his instructions to the letter. And if it's when it's clear, if it's in your context of your passage, it's just an all-encompassing, I need to walk in the word, and however that looks for you. But when it's clear instruction, you need to follow it. So I usually call that improved obedience.
I like that. That's good. I like that. I've never thought improved obedience. I like that. Okay. Let me just read 6:13 through 16. You shall fear the Lord your God and serve him. You shall take oaths in his name. You shall not go after other gods, the gods of people who are around you. For the Lord your God is a jealous God among you, lest the anger of the Lord your God be aroused against you and destroy you from the face of the earth. You shall not tempt the Lord your God as you tempted him in Massa. So, once again, we really need to honor the Lord in good times and in bad times. And, that's kind of relates back to what we talked about earlier with the Moses striking the rock, and the issue in Massa and Meribah. That was the earlier one in Exodus 17. But the other thing that's interesting about it is verse 13, and along with chapter 10 verse 20 was the third temptation quoted by Jesus in Matthew 4:10 and Luke 4:8, which I thought was interesting. So even the Lord was using this verse or this chapter here to defeat Satan, to not even argue with him, just say, look, here's what God says. And his verse 16 was in the second temptation, was quoted by Jesus. And so true, that we just need to be in tune, and it's hard. We have so many distractions. There's so many things running around in front of us today, especially all the media stuff, and that's just hard to keep focus on. I mean, I fall off of it all the time. Trust me. What did I just do? What did I just say? That happens to me a lot. So, but it needs to be so important to our Christian walk as we go through life and see things. And let's see, we're doing pretty good. Let's see, who can I pick on here? Hey, Jody, do you want to read verses 17 through 19? 17, 18, 19?
17, I could try.
Okay.
You shall diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God, his testimonies, his statutes, which he has commanded you. And you shall do what is right and good in the sight of the Lord, that it may be well with you. Wow, not that. And that you may go in and possess the good land of which the Lord swore to your fathers, to cast out all the enemies from before you, as the Lord had spoken. You said 20 or stop at 19?
19, that's fine, yeah. So, it's just, once again, it's when we're in times of prosperity, and even though we got crazy stuff going on today with, war in Ukraine, high gas prices, you name it, all that kind of stuff, we're still in a time of prosperity. I mean, we can still go to the store and buy a loaf of bread. We can go get gas for our car. We can go down and get a Coke or drink or whatever, a cup of coffee at Starbucks or whatever else. It might cost us more, but we can do all that stuff still. And but we have to remember who provided all this for me. And it's so easy for us to say, well, I worked hard and now I can retire and I've made all this money and everything else. But it wouldn't be any good unless we remember who provided all this for us. And I really, to me, it's just, like I said, I kind of harp on the same subject. I'm sorry about that, but I just it really pierces my heart a lot of times when I think, oh man, I really should be working on passing the traditions down and that kind of stuff. Any questions or comments? Or
I like these two phrases. The very first thing in 17 and 18, because they're even today. Obviously, they're still for us. I forgot how Jody read it, but my translation says to carefully observe the commands of the Lord. They said there here in 14, don't follow the gods and the gods of the peoples around you. So there's going to be people around, and we have competing instruction. We have our bosses, we have our neighbors, we have our social groups. We're going to be given instruction, and so we have to carefully observe the Lord's. And it kind of coincides with right as 18, do what is right and good in the Lord's sight.
Mhm.
And that's kind of hard to do, especially with societal pressures, even within the church sometimes. And at least for us, Gina and I have settled in our heart, we're going to always be the weird ones, no matter where I'm at. If I'm working in the world and it's just a bunch of unbelievers, or even sometimes within the church, we want to do what is right in the Lord's sight and not what anyone else's sight, as well as we're going to try as best as, the Holy Spirit helps us to observe their commands. And sometimes we'll go against the grain everywhere, and we just kind of have to settle that in our own hearts. And that kind of helps to do that. And I mean, those are still obviously important today with the competing, things that come at us in this world from different directions, from people that we look up to, from people from who have authority over us from a earthly perspective. So I like those two verses there.
Mhm.
I want to point out that verse 17. It's interesting. He says, you shall diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God, his testimonies and his statutes, which he has commanded you. It's interesting that he says there's three things that we need to do. And I think we often latch onto that first one. We have to obey the commandments of the Lord, but he also says his testimonies. That's interesting. What do you guys think that means? That
Where
it's
does yours say testimonies?
Yeah.
Mine says decrees and statutes.
Yeah.
Mine says you should diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God, his testimonies and his statutes, which he has commanded you.
Mhm.
Your guys is different. Okay, so
Mine
then I
says
just have more
decrees.
work to do than you do.
Of course.
Well, yeah, but you're right, John. It's a three-pronged approach. There's three separate things that we need to, diligently keep. And
Well, what are testimonies? He asked the question. Does anybody know what he means by testimony?
anybody?
His testimonies. It doesn't say our testimonies, it says his testimonies.
Yeah, yeah.
I
And
think. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Dad.
it just amazes me what Moses could do. I mean, if I was Moses, I would have gone insane the first week. I mean, I would have literally, I couldn't have. And even when he struck the rock in anger, he had no doubt about the outcome. He knew exactly what was going to happen. Even though he was angry at the people and he was frustrated, and I can understand him being frustrated. I would have been too.
Yeah.
But he had no doubt about God. And that's one of God's testimonies, that God is always true. He's always true. And so we look at his testimony. He is in control. God is, I heard a saying the other day, the world is not going to pot. It's, man, I can't get it quite right. See, the world is not going, it's falling into place according to God's plan. Now, I didn't say it quite the way it said. The world's not going to pot. It's falling into place according to God's plan. But it's his testimony. God is faithful. God is true. Moses wasn't faithful and true in everything, but he was a faithful believer in God. And it's God that we're putting our trust in, not ourselves.
Right. Well, and like you said, Dan, it's the steadiness and the directness, of God's testimonies. Like you said, we as and Moses as a man, all have our failings. I mean, God said talk, and he struck. So whereas, if there had been God there, God would have talked to the people, talked to the rock. But I think it's so important that that's why you always go back to it says here his testimonies. It's the Lord. It's because that never changes. That's always the same day in and day out.
Amen.
And his statutes. I mean, that one. The third part of that. I guess.
Didn't Moses marry an Ethiopian?
Yes.
And they were commanded not unless she was a she was Jewish. I don't know um, they were commanded to not, marry outside of their race, I guess would be the word. They were supposed to all intermarry with other Jewish people.
That came after Abraham, Jody.
Was it?
Yeah.
I thought
Abraham
it
was a
was
Gentile.
I thought it was in Leviticus.
I don't know about that.
I mean, that Leviticus is still after he got married, though.
Yeah, the line of Israel, the Jews came with Jacob. It began really with him. I mean, it began with Abraham, but Abraham was not under the Mosaic law.
Interesting. That's a good point. Okay, so let's see. John, I'm going to pick on you again. Can you read 20 through 25, please?
Sure. When your son asks you in time to come, saying, "What is the meaning of the testimonies?" Hey, that's exactly what I said. Okay, let me start over. When your son asks you in time to come, saying, "What is the meaning of the testimonies, the statutes, and the judgments which the Lord our God has commanded you?" Then you shall say to your son, "We were slaves of Pharaoh in Egypt, and the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. And the Lord showed signs and wonders before our eyes, and great and severe, against Egypt, Pharaoh, and all his household. Then he brought us out of from there, that he might bring us in to give us the land of which he swore to our fathers." 24 as well, Charlie?
Yeah, 24 and 25.
And the Lord commanded us to observe all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God for our good always, that he might preserve us alive as it is this day. Then it will be righteousness for us. For if we are careful to observe all these commandments before the Lord our God, and he has commanded us.
The key thing that I garner out of this is in verse 20 there. It says, when your son asks you, and if you look at, you see that, when you've beaten your son into submission, he says, "Oh, okay, I'll do it." It's not. It's when your son asks you, and how do you get people to ask you something? And that is, and I think it goes back to our testimony, our walk, our example. What are we displaying? And because our children are going to ask us, "Dad, what's this? Mom, what's this? Dad, what's this? What's this? What's this?" And if you're walking in with the Lord and doing as it said above, when you slide down, when you walk, you're driving the car, on the bus, whatever, teaching them diligently, those questions come back, and they're seeing that more is caught than taught. And I think when they start asking you questions, it's like, okay, I'm seeing things here, and I'm trying to develop in my mind who is this person? Who is this God? What is this? What is this all about? And and he repeats about the statutes, and the commandments that we're careful to observe all of them as we go along in the Lord. And I think it's so important for us. There's a quote here that Winston Churchill, some people say Winston Churchill said it, but it actually was a different gentleman. It was, those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. And I think that's so true. It actually, his name was George Santayana, Spanish philosopher, who actually was the original guy, source of the quotation. But it's so true. I mean, if we don't learn and teach from our history what we learned in our history and pass it on down, then we're all doomed to repeat it. And I think it's so true in our Christian walk that we need, people aren't gonna just walk by and our charisma or our Jesus will spill off into them and they'll walk away Christians. They need to see what we're doing. They observe and then watch and then ask. And the way they ask is they go, "Wow, that guy is even though all this chaos is going on or whatever else, that guy's he kind of understands what's going on, and Jesus teaching in the synagogue and standing up and teaching, and everybody was like, wow, we've never heard that before. And it's all so important, because then it's not that it draws attention to you, but it's what the Lord is doing through you. And I think it's how our responses are is what's so important, which goes back to Moses was supposed to speak to the rock and not hit the rock, and like turn that glory to the Lord, and then it'll be passed on from there. Any comments, questions?
I think the linchpin is in verse 12, when you kind of picked it back out there, Charlie, when you said, then beware lest you forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, because he's about to bring them to a place that they didn't work for or work towards, and he's about to push away their enemies. They didn't have to fight them. He's about to bring them to a place where there's plenty. They didn't have to plant anything or do anything. And in those times of prosperity, or when they're surrounded by ease, they might forget the Lord. And when you're talking about earlier, passing it on to your children, and then later on now, when your son asks you when the time comes, is to be able to bring back into mind that it was the Lord who did all of that. And it's almost as if he's saying, be ready. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to come to a point where your son looks around, or your children looks around and goes, how did this all happen? And how did we get here? And he's basically saying, remember, don't forget that it was the Lord who did the entire thing for you, and to be able to bring back to mind the story of how, God was faithful to what he promised, you and the people. So it's interesting to me that that he uses the word beware in verse 12, and then he brings it back here when he's talking about, the things that God has done. He's like, hey, be careful, be aware, that this is going to happen, and not just not just your sons, but other people might ask, what's going on and how did you get here? And always be ready to give an answer for the hope that's within us, kind of thing. Yeah.
And then that was, like I said, is that he repeats it, so this must be important. It's like he tells you in the beginning, like you said, verse 12, and then at the end here, he says, beware and be ready. And it's so true, March, what you said, that we need to have an answer, and it needs to be not what we did, it's what the Lord did, because that's what's going to show. And I think that's so true. And whether it's, like, say, leadership, family, whatever it is, we need to, honor the Lord in everything we do, and not necessarily walk around, throwing, preaching the Bible at everybody, but in our lifestyle, our reactions. I mean, you think about it, how many times a day do you get asked questions, and some of them probing questions, and what's your reaction? How do you react? Do you get mad? Are you frustrated? It's like, well, let me think about it. What is your response? And I think it's so true. And, what was it last week, John? I brought up about the nuclear reactors and the rods, that we're supposed to be the calming rods that go in the reactor to slow the reactions down. And that's so true in our world today, that we as Christians need to be those rods that slow the reactions down and say, look, this is nothing that everything man made is going to disappear, but the Lord is not. He is not going away. And I know I've set my focus on the Lord and direction, and even though everything falls away around us, I'm still gonna follow him.
Yeah, I'm going back to that verse about be diligent about keeping his commandments and the testimonies. And I like that, because this testimonies is what he's showing us here is that's, as March was talking about, remembering the things that God has done for you. And so it's not only that we're supposed to keep his commands and share those with, our children and those around us, but we're also supposed to remind them about what God has done for us. And we can take this corporately and like, what God has done for Israel and what God has done for the church, but also there's a personal aspect of what God has done for me and reminding people what he's done for me, because it's still pretty cool.
Mhm, mhm. Very true. Very true. I mean, you know,
It seems, excuse me, I got something in my throat. I think I've got an Adam's apple in my throat, but anyway. And that's one where it says, you know, you shall say to your sons, we were slaves in Pharaoh. You shall share your history with your children. And a lot of times our children don't know our history unless we share that history with them.
Yeah.
Because they didn't grow up in it. We grew up in it.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
anyway, that all points back to sharing in the Lord.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good point too, because when we're kids, we don't think to ask lots of questions
Mhm.
about history and about grandparents and all that. We don't ask the questions when we're kids, and then when we get older, we're like, oh, I don't know the answer to that if it wasn't shared with us. Yeah.
Yeah. The example I have of that is, how many times have, your grandparent or your parents, like my case, my wife's parents, they passed away, and we're going through all the old family photo albums, and there's pictures of people. And it's like, who's this? Who's it? And we don't know because that wasn't passed down to us. And so they're just pictures, but they might be special family friends. They might have been an uncle or an aunt or something like that. We don't know. And it goes back to, us taking the time to spend with them, but more of them saying, okay, not sitting you down saying, okay, look at these pictures and write this down and do this and this and this, but just being able to observe, pass and say, look, these are all our family members, or, leave some notes behind, or, something, but pass those traditions down some way or another.